Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Neil Robertson. I'm the Executive Chairman of Complete. And I'm delighted to welcome on stage today Alex, Hayden and Matt for our conversation and debate about understanding millennial executives and determining how they're going to impact your practice's future. I want to start with a quote from the CEO of Snapchat, because if you look at Snapchat and its impact on the world, I think the man has a very insightful view that millennials do have a sense of entitlement, a sense of ownership, because after all, this is the world that we were born to, and we are responsible for it. And they do have a different perspective. Just for a bit of entertainment, I thought we'd define actually who each of us are in terms of dates. Now, if you look at online, there's a few years in terms of the banding here. First and foremost, included in the audience, please, how many baby boomers are there in here? 3 of us. Okay. We're still here, still fighting. In terms of Generation X, so quite a few more. Millennials. Oh yeah. And finally, Generation Z. And there's one there at the back. Okay, excellent. So it's quite interesting. A complete 76% of our employees are made up of millennials and Generation Z. And so we have a rather interesting insight into the world, but the software that we're writing is actually written for that generation. How do we get here? And I thought this would just be interesting to put down some of the technologies from the advent of the PC coming into the market way back in about 1981. Fax that transformed our communication from being letters sent backwards and forwards, normally taking 2 weeks, to being able to send a letter instantaneously to whoever we want to put it to. The mobile brick, which used to go in cars and eventually be carted around. Email, 1996, that first came out and started to actually change the way we communicate. You used to send an email and then you'd ring up the other person to see whether they got it or not at the time. It improved. The World Wide Web, which was once described as the largest library in the world with all the lights turned off, until Google turned up and started to index it and turn that lights on. But the really big change was Facebook. And Facebook initially came into the marketplace very much based on PCs. My kids grew up on it. It started that interaction, the beginning of social media. And then, of course, the biggest one of all, the most disruptive piece of change that's taken place, certainly in my lifetime and probably in anyone's lifetime, the advent of the smartphone. So, in terms of their lives, the millennials, is they've grown up in a world that is 100% real-time, online, all the time. And an interesting fact is they spend about 35% of their life online. So it's not just work life, it's their social life. And I think that makes their expectations different. But we're going to debate that. So, bear with me 1 second. Right, okay. So first of all, actually, I'm just going to ask if the panelists could introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about background. So we can start off with you, Alex.
we're going to sharing the microphone here. Hi, I'm Alex Bond-Burnett, and I do have a digital practice. I started 5 years ago. It's called Blue Arrow Accounting, with a team of 5. I also actually have more experience as a trainer and facilitator in communication and leadership skills. So I also run a practice called Bond Ambition, doing that and helping financial professionals with their speaking skills. So working primarily with millennials.
Hi there, so my name's Matt Port, and as one of the older millennials, I've experienced life on both sides of the fence. For most of my employed life, nobody really knew what a millennial was, and so I was often just classed as a little bit difficult. About 4 years ago, I started my own firm. We're now a team of 12, and our average age is 29. Most of our clients are run by millennials also.
And my name's Hayden, so I originally am Australian. I currently work as a cloud specialist in a carpenter box, which is a 100-year-old, nearly 100-year-old accountancy firm. I'm down in Sussex, so I look predominantly at the systems that our clients have, and obviously Australia being a couple of years ahead in this the cloud space, that sort of knowledge has been quite helpful. That background's quite helpful for me.
Great, guys. Well, thanks very much indeed for that. So, starting off with regards to the first subject, I mean, obviously, millennials, they are a large group of people that cover the spectrum of different types of personalities, etc. So what we're really going to focus on today is the brightest and the best. And so the question really is that if we're going to bring these people into our practices, how do we successfully interact with them as they become a primary interaction, not only within our own companies to bring the brightest and best into our own practice, but also with regards to the fact that they are becoming more and more the key people that we're talking to with regards to our clients. So if I could throw that one open to you first, Alex, and obviously everyone else join in.
As in, kind of what are we looking for? I'm going to look again at the question so I can be completely concise. So, are millennials being the brightest and best? Is that mainly your question at the moment? How do we find them and keep them? Now, I can only attest to what I have discovered in my work, and actually I live in a really rural area, and it was really difficult to find anyone who wasn't boarding their career up in London and someone who was available and wanted to work on my terms. That said, actually I experienced my team has been born actually from the fact that they needed flexible working hours, and again I was able to provide that because I didn't want to have a 9 to 5. My team are massively overqualified for the role that I was actually trying to employ them for, and that's how I found the best and brightest, is that they are within their own right massively intelligent, very qualified and very ambitious, and by that standing, working in industry did not work for them. And that's how I found them, and that's how I got my millennials on board, was because actually they're looking for something a little bit more and balance, and that's what worked for me.
Yeah, just to echo that, I mean, a lot of our recruitment is done down in Somerset as well, so it's a bit of a different rural environment to London. But I'd say be seen where they are. They spend a lot of time on social media, but there's a lot of content on social media, particularly LinkedIn if they're in a business mindset. In our last apprentice recruitment, we actually advertised for a new person to join our table tennis team before going on to talk about the specifics of the role and then the development opportunities, because I think the brightest talents really want to know not just about the current role, but how you'll be able to develop them. And we'd had some good success with that. The point about the table tennis team member wasn't to be gimmicky, but it was just to stand out from the crowd and to put our culture front and centre. I think it just kind of says a lot about the type of environment that they'll be coming into.
Yeah, and just sort of coming from an employee of our firm's really quite traditional, and sort of looking at what made me want to work there was simply just the fact that there's a challenge and there's a rule to sort of something to break, perhaps, no, but I think it's really good to say, well, actually, I can make a difference here by implementing, doing whatever it is that I'm doing, but it's the fact that I can make a difference that really attracts me somewhere, which I think is, that's what really, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting to know, actually, because we've been recruiting very rapidly, and we found that looking at the people that are coming to us is an awful lot of them actually have had multiple jobs. They've lasted in the job 9 months, a year, 18 months. Now, historically, I'd have looked at a CV and thought, well, they're going to turn up here, they're going to be here a year. The moment they know how to do the job that I employed them to do, they're going to want to do something else and they're going to leave and move on. And that certainly seems to be the case. So how much of a challenge is it, therefore, if you're bringing these type of people in, that you're ensuring that you can actually enable that individual to evolve, to actually keep on learning and developing their skills if you want to keep them?
I think that's a really good point, is that actually, and I was talking to someone about this just a minute ago, is that you spend all this money investing in someone's education, their technical education, their professional education, and then they go and leave you. And they will go and either start out by themselves or start a different profession altogether. I think the key is understanding why they're working for you in the first place, and that usually is it's not just anymore to sit there and rise in the ranks and maybe make partner one day. It's more than that, and if you keep them intrigued and keep feeding that curiosity that actually we're finding in the millennial space now, we want to learn more. We're absorbing so much information, and it's actually keeping that sense of ourselves. We're curious, we want information, we want desire, so you need to keep that going and go, okay, great, you've conquered that area of technical ability. How can we now help you? What's the next stage for you? And get there before they do. Because the reason why they leave is because they go, okay, I've done that now what? I don't want to just keep ticking over, I want to move forward, and how can I do that? And that's what I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's been totally my experience as well. The annual appraisal isn't enough. It has to be regular feedback. They have to have a personal development plan that covers the whole year with at least quarterly reviews on that to let them know where they're going. One of the things we've done in our firm is we try to understand what they want to achieve in their career. Some people will say, I want to be a partner in the business, and we let them know what that pathway is and the skills that they need to acquire. But also some people will say, well, I want to go and be a finance director in another business, and we don't prejudice for that. We just help them acquire a different set of skills which will be relevant to them, because at the end of the day, if they feel they're achieving their potential with us, they'll stay longer. Whether they stay forever, that's not really our expectation.
So I think, in terms of attention span, again, millennials have said, they don't tend to focus on something for a very short period of time. Just incidentally, from a marketing perspective, there's an interesting piece of analysis. If you're marketing online in social media, you have less than 1/3 of a second to furrow somebody's brow. So as they're skipping it through it, and oh yes, that's interesting, I'll click on it. So 1/3 of a second in terms of your marketing. And that's, if you like, their mentality about going into things and interacting with it. And with a very short attention span, then in terms of keeping them engaged and taking them forward, that's obviously key. I'd like to ask the question about one thing that's sort of become more and more important, I think, in terms of the way you manage millennials, is the need to be liked. Any piece of social media going out there, any piece of Facebook, etc., anything goes out, whether or not you did a good thing or a bad thing is purely dependent on whether, or how many likes you got. And if you think about that when it comes back into the workplace, where there isn't a digital like facility with regards to their workplace activities, how important is it that you give feedback to them? Perhaps if you'd like to pick that one, Hayden, in terms of,
I think this is quite an interesting point, because as much as I will debate for 10, 15 minutes what filter I should put on my Instagram post, I think that we don't take as much, or we do take just as much time on making business decisions or employment decisions. So when I undertake something, when I do something, I much want to do a good job as much as I want to get the appreciation of the people that I work with. Even if it is just sort of a pat on the back, it sounds almost condescending, but I think that it's quite positive to reflect that, actually what you've done here is being appreciated by others in more than just a financial way. I mean, there's nothing quite like having a client say, oh, you've done a really great job for me and I really appreciate what you do, because it's equal, if not more important than getting likes on Instagram.
So I think, if I was to sort of summarize this, is that millennials, the brightest and best, are different. They have, I think, a greater expectation. They expect a higher level of recognition in terms of both good and bad. We use the term mentoring a lot, and it really is, again, if you're bringing in very young people, especially Generation Z, If you tell people to do something, then they can go and execute a task, that's one thing. Mentoring is enabling people to understand what that task is, what its relevance is, and how it fits in within other activities, and allow them to grow into space. And if you allow people to grow into space, then it starts to tick all of their boxes in terms of their own self-development. The praise is important, as is, if you like, the constructive criticism in terms of them moving on. Millennials, if they feel that they actually are being appreciated, they can see that they are progressing, then the probability is if you can show them that, and when you're looking to recruit them, that opportunity, it is good. But also, at the moment, we've got a 100% retention rate on both millennials and on Generation Z in terms of keeping them. And it's a full-on activity in terms of actually making sure you achieve that. So, if I move to the next question, employment within accounting practices. How many people here are in accounts in practice? Presumably all of you? Oh, I'm going to say this with a bit of trepidation. Compliance and audits work has never really seemed to be sort of like an extremely exciting activity. In terms of millennials, is that actually really the case? And are there aspects of those roles that are exciting, but what else is it that you potentially are going to provide to attract the brightest and best? And perhaps if I could throw that one across at you, Matt?
Sure. So in terms of my practice, we don't do audits and we don't do statutory accounts. So we tend to promote the opportunity for people to understand our clients' businesses and help them grow. There'll be lots of seminars here over these 2 days about moving away from compliance into advisory. But yeah, so from my experience historically of the compliance work, then yeah, it's a good time to be encouraging them to look beyond the numbers and to actually delve into that side of the business, and potentially not to deliver advisory services directly to the client, but make suggestions to their managers about things that they could see in the accounts that the client might help the client, and then that can be filtered out internally.
Yeah, so our firm has a audit department. I very early on worked out that I did not want to do compliance work, probably in the first 12 months. I think it was a great foundation, but I knew that it wasn't going to be something that I was going to be doing in 20, 30 years. And I think that one key element that I've probably taken away, and I sort of encourage, is that I will get someone to make five suggestions or 5 assumptions or 5 even just points of interest about a client once they've finished their compliance. And after they've finished that compliance work, they'll make those suggestions, encourages them to think about what they've done. And then what that allows when they bring that back to actually, well, I think that we could do this a little bit better. I think they could be doing that a little bit better. And that takes something that's quite mundane and generic, a little extra time, but I think that adds so much more value. And then it gives you the ability to really get them, or get everyone who's in the practice, to really understand what's going on in that client's business.
I think I've maybe approached everything in a different way. I totally get, because in our practice, I mean, I started out being everything. It was just me. I was a sole practitioner, and it grew. And then I realised that I needed someone else to take on X, Y, and Z in terms of the roles and the capabilities. And what I've ended up more developing is a bit of a community where we find the skill sets that work. And I'm not quite sure if I was very lucky or very strategic in finding my business partner, Katie. I thought she was so brilliant that actually I wanted to keep her, and the only way I could keep her was basically proposing to her and giving her my business. But that was one of the things I was more than willing to do, because I could see the potential. And the potential was that she was, or is, she is everything that I'm not, in a way. She complements me massively. So together we work. Separately we were really great at what we were doing. Together we work amazingly well, because I love doing the stuff that she hates doing, which is actually some of the client relationships in the building, and then all of that personal bits and pieces, and she is really good at the detail-orientated tax compliance and everything that actually I will get down to and do, but I'd quite like to move on and maybe do something else. And we're both very, very honest about our strengths and our weaknesses, and I think and then turned that into how I recruit people and just say, okay, what are you really good at? Let's get you doing more of that, and how can I use that in my business to work for me? And equally, then we just started meeting more people where it's like, okay, let's have a look at how you work, what your personality profile is and how that fits with our team. And then let's see what your skill sets are, and let's really play on those. And that's what keeps the interest going, I think, as well.
Okay, so to sort of staying on topic with regards to sort of this, but moving it slightly. I mean, one thing that I hear an awful lot about, and I think for millennials it's particularly true, is this work-life balance. And obviously they're 100% tech-enabled. So from their perspective, they can have access to whatever they want on their mobile device, or whether they've got access on their on their laptop. Why are we asking them to commute into work at the most expensive time, in the most crammed carriages, take the drain up into the city, and then repeat the performance on the way back, where actually it makes no difference where they work whatsoever? But how do we deal with that, given it takes a huge amount of trust that if that person is either flexi hours, they can come in later or earlier, not so much, but working from home, because assuming they've got to get a task done. Have you tried flexi hours yet, or even working from home as part of your strategy?
Yeah, so we've got a couple people who do that. I think it has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. So in terms of the travel point, we have core office hours of 10 till 4 that you have to be in, but as long as you work your hours, you can come or leave at whatever time you like. And we do have a lady in our payroll team who works exclusively from home because she works autonomously. She doesn't have any line manager requirements. But where we have a lot of apprentices, they don't have the skills to work from home on their own. They need support. Therefore, the people who are supervising them need to be in the office to be available as well. So yeah, it's a case-by-case basis, but equally, sometimes people will have a really time-orientated, focus-orientated task. And we say, hey, if you want to work from home for the morning to get that done, no problem. And we just trust our people, and they see that, and we monitor the output. It would be really obvious if those people weren't delivering. And I'd actually go so far as to say that when people are working from home, they're actually more conscious that people might be sceptical that they're not working, so they kind of go over and do a little bit more than they should.
Vicky. Yeah, we do completely flexi hours, basically. I was obviously fortunate, but when I started out, I actually started my practice entirely. I was a bookkeeper. I wanted to take on clients flexibly to actually supplement my facilitation and training career, because it can be very much a seasonal kind of work. And that's stayed with the business entirely as it's grown. And the reason why I think that how it's originated has been quite organic in terms of being flexible. So I chose Xero as our partner and who we went with because I could do everything digitally, and it didn't matter where I was. I could have everything at my fingertips, and that's suited, again, it was kind of suited all around me. But then I realised it didn't just suit me, it suited my team. I think you're totally right. Trust is a massive issue, and I have had big problems with people basically taking the mick. And that's where you have to implement a very strong company culture where you get people wanting to do stuff for you, because there is a mutual satisfaction and a mutual gain from your community, from your work. We can all go, we have a central office, and it's like a central hub, and people can come in and go when they need it. It can be there for any paperwork or filing needs. We have it's essentially like almost a hot desking facility for our business. So any meetings, if you want to just come in for a few hours, that's totally fine. Everyone has set hours within the week, and whether they take that at home or if the kids are sick or there's a school nativity on, yeah, we go and we'll go, okay, really sorry, I can't do Thursday today. I'll come in tomorrow. Is that all right? We go, yes, as long as you, never have a client chasing me for anything. You always get there first. There is a bit of an element of, okay, you might be working at midnight then, but because that's totally up to you. So the responsibility is on them, and I think that's important because they have a job to do. And equally, we are there to support each other. So I took on a new hire in January 2017, and I had just found out that I was pregnant, which is not great because I'd also just signed a 5-year lease on a premises, and I was thinking, oh, this is not going to go very well. Flexible working had to be, I couldn't have done it without that, and my team couldn't have done it without that. As it happened, really bad timing, the new hire also ended up being pregnant. We had a baby's 8 hours between each other, and our busiest VAT return season. So within 2 weeks, both of us took 2 weeks off, completely exclusively, and at home with newborn babies cradled in our laps, we were doing on zero, doing our VAT returns and getting the job done. And sometimes, as an entrepreneur, that's what it takes, but if you inspire that within your team to work together, wow, you've got a really great team, and that's why we all work together so well.
And I mean, that's terrifying. And I think that, you know, both of your points are completely valid, and we've only relatively recently introduced flexible working, so we have 10 to 4 core hours as well, and you have to have been there for a while, at least past your probation, before you can work from home. However, you do need to be in the office at that time, and I think that does assist with the mentoring, and it does assist with being there both for clients and for other people in the practice. I spend a lot of time out of the office at clients' premises, so I will be on my laptop and on my phone, and I've got all the apps on my phone, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Trello, everything's on there, so I can work on the train wherever I need to, and it just means I don't physically need to be in the office all the time to make sure things are getting done, and I really quite like that, because I will be, you know, I don't need to worry about backups, or I don't need to worry about have I got the right, you know, USB stick with all their information on. Everything should be electronic, everything should be accessible. There should be no reason as to why you can't throw your laptop into a river, go and buy another one, and everything should be exactly as it was, give or take, within sort of 5-10 minutes. Depends on what you buy, but yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering if I could ask you a question actually with that. So we do, in terms of communication with the rest of the office, so it's something I have to be quite strict about, because obviously when you're all working remotely, it can be quite hard to keep that communication up. And so I have experienced before when people are just not good at the basic things like CCing you in, like giving you a heads up or sending you a message and going, hey, like on WhatsApp, we use WhatsApp at the moment, and we also have a private Facebook group so that we can share things between us and create, again, a bit of community. How does Slack work for you, or how do you keep that level of communication up between the team? Yeah,
so we use lots of different channels. So I'm sure most of you kind of know what Slack is, but if you don't, it's sort of like an instant messaging sort of service. So effectively, we have different channels. We use the notifications, and if you are going to be using Slack and you want someone to look at something, you have to at them and tag them and make sure that they get it. It also, so we use that massively to collaborate. So I've got a team of 10 people that work for me half a day each, which can I just say is dreadful. But we use Slack to make sure that everyone else knows what's going on and what's due and what hasn't been done the previous day. So utilizing that as a platform has been really, really helpful. But if you don't have someone engaged or properly using it, you're still going to run into some issues.
So it's interesting in terms of, again, the technologies that we're using and how that's actually evolving. The other side I think that's taking place obviously is clients. If you look at the growth next year, 50% of all working employees in the UK will be millennials or Generation Z. And so obviously with regards to the growth of small business startups, and you can see that with the explosion of Xero and QuickBooks and so on, these organizations, predominantly more and more of the senior management that you're talking to in the clients are in fact millennials. They're tech savvy, they're on the ball. And when you look at your accounting practice and going out, obviously keeping existing clients, but when you're going out to look for new clients, then is technology and the ability to offer services and outsource services and other technology is a key component of your proposition to this changing audience. Because if the accountant isn't talking to them about this, then who is in terms of their financial management? Perhaps, Hayden, if you'd like to just pick that one up again.
Yeah, so that's, again, a really, really interesting point. I think that a lot of our new client proposals and very substantial fees all involve a technology aspect, so it's systems or processes. And we had a client recently come to us who's been with their previous accountant for 30-something years, and because they didn't speak to them about the cloud and systems, they came over to us, and it was such an easy sell because all we had to do was say, yeah, we can offer this, and this is how we'll do things differently. And they made her write everything in a book, everything in a book, even though it was on Sage, and then send the book with everything in a massive trolley. And when she explained that to me, I was just, how do you comprehend and how do you charge for that as a service? All of them, whether or not they're tiny startups or huge old corporations, you will have that element should be sort of critical, and we very rarely have to offer these services because all of our clients will always constantly ask us what's next, or what can I bolt on, or what's the additional thing that I can.
So this is really a competitive differential. And I think this is an interesting one in terms of actually how the world is changing and how millennials are starting to redefine accounting practices. I don't know if you would like to comment on that, just your view of technology and how it changes your proposition to your clients.
Yeah, sure. So I feel quite strongly that technology is a tool and not a USP in any way. And it comes back to understanding what the client wants to achieve. So most of our clients, for example, they just want us to deal with it really, and they want to interact with us as little as possible. And the less we have to speak to them about records and things, the better for us. It's the most profitable. So it's really about listening to what their pain points are, what they want to achieve, and having the knowledge of the various software providers that are out there to say, well, I think this would be a good solution for you, and then this will achieve the desired outcome. And I think technology is a huge part, but on its own, it doesn't achieve a great deal.
I think from my own personal experience in terms of technology, I will put my hand up and own up, is my first ever job was as a bought ledger clerk. In 1976, and then it wasn't all in black and white. However, I lasted in the job about a year. I found out after 3 months that actually I was doing the same thing every single day, and I knew how to do it. The only thing was it was very hard to get a job in 1976, so it took me 9 months to find one. Moved away. Interestingly enough, we automate the purchasing process. Something like 65% of the UK businesses in the SME, the AP function works exactly the same way as I did in 1976 in terms of all the work from the time that invoice arrives until such time as it's actually delivered into the accounting software. So I think in terms of changes, accounting practices, if organizations aren't going out proactively being directed by their accountants, or people being made aware by their accountants of technology changes, then changes tend not to take place. Next subject, yes, this is a quote, excuse me, I have to read this. It's from Jerry Sinfield, which is, a recent survey stated that the average person's greatest fear is have to speak in public. Seems relevant at this moment in time. This is ranked even higher than death, which actually, funny enough, came third, which means that you can sort of come to the conclusion that at a funeral is the majority of people would prefer to be the person in the coffin than the person giving the eulogy. Given that millennials obviously have a propensity to spend all of their time interacting digitally, then what is it that we need to do potentially to help them in terms of their communication skills in the real world? And I think, given your background, Alex, this is perfect for you.
Thank you. I'll tell you a story. So there's a law firm, so professional service firm that I was working with, and they have a lot of high-end clients. And they have a very, very rigorous graduate scheme program. So they have people that have been in study for a serious amount of time, building their education and not actually having any hands-on people experience or getting out there and chatting to people, and as you say, being very technical. And he said, I've spent all these money getting the best and brightest graduates out there, and I do not trust them to have a conversation with my clients. And that was really quite something for me to hear and to work with, because it was, we're having to trust them with having very serious conversations. I like to think that, yes, we are technical people. We have firms that deal with numbers and finances, but actually behind every number is a human interaction. A human caused that transaction. So if we bring it back to the fact that it's someone's business, someone's livelihood, you've really got to have some gravitas behind that conversation. So, yes, you're totally right. I think some younger people, especially, I mean, I was a bit surprised to find that I'm a millennial. I didn't consider myself to be one. And quite a lot of, I think, us, you were saying older millennials, I think there's like such a wide gap from the 1980s to like 94. That's a huge area, which actually almost I feel maybe should be split up, because you've got kind of, I think, maybe us older ones and then the younger ones. And yeah, they've had, so my cousin, he's 24. He's on his phone a lot. He loves Instagram. He knows how to use stories. But actually, put him in front of a team to give like professional feedback. I mean, I personally would trust him, but if I had some of his generation, you've got to wonder what you do. So, what do you do about that? I'd say get them the practice. Have them understand the implications for someone, why it's important. Give them the responsibility. I'm a really big fan of firm boundaries and freedom within firm boundaries. But get them doing stuff. Get them experiencing it, because that's the only way, that's what they're lacking, is experience. That's all it is.
Yeah, so we kind of have 2 points to this, really. The first thing is developing those sort of conversational skills internally. So, for example, when a new apprentice comes in to the business, it was the next junior apprentice really who'll train them and start having to explain things and deal with incoming queries. And I think, you know, if we take sort of the millennial problem back to its core, problem-solving skills are a real part of that. If you want to know how to do something, you go on YouTube and look at a video, and that's how they've learned. And if you're on the phone to the client, you can't go and look at YouTube to find the answer. So I think it's really within the way we interact with them internally to teach them those skills. So, for example, if someone comes to me and says, I don't know how to do this, I'll send them away and say, well, come back with a suggestion, and then I'll tell you if I agree or not. And that at least makes them sort of go through the thought process. And that's really what client interactions are. There's a question, I need to search my experience. If I don't know, then I'll go away, find the answer, and come back to you.
I would definitely say there's actually having the confidence to say you don't know something, and that's what a lot of people struggle with, is that because I think information is at our fingertips, if we don't know it instantaneously, then we're going to be a failure. And I think the younger millennials especially can feel that way, like if I don't know it. I don't know if anyone ever watched I can't remember what the TV show called now, but it was a bit like Friends, and it was based in New York. How I Met Your Mother, that was it. And they play a game. There's a group of 4 friends, and they play a game, where they put all of their phones in the middle of the table face down, and they have to actually answer a question without Googling it. And I can't remember, that would be a really interesting thing to try and test out with a younger workforce. But I think, getting the practice in and the strength and the courage to say, actually, I'm not really sure about that right now, but give me a second, I'm going to check that out for you. And actually, if you give them the courage and the capabilities to be able to say that and go, that is a really good question, thank you so much for answering that. I'm not sure about that right now, but give me a second, I'll go check it. And just give them that confidence to do it.
Okay, we have just under 5 minutes left. So I think actually been an interesting conversation. Thank you very much indeed for that. It would be very useful just to, if you could each summarize a couple of points that you think are important in terms of finding and keeping the best millennials, and perhaps one in terms of avoiding, with somebody that perhaps you wouldn't want to take on board. What would they be? Perhaps if you, that's over there, thank you.
I would just say, make it clear that it's a workplace where you can grow and develop, and that there are going to be opportunities, even if you're not entirely sure that they will be, but really let us as millennials really thrive in that environment. And something to avoid, I don't know. Maybe just it's an attitude. An attitude problem, even though it might be a little bit like we might question things, we might not see it in the same way, it might be a little bit lazy or whatever however you interpret that. I think that there can be quite a cocky and arrogant to millennials as well, going, I know everything, and that's not, I think, a very positive characteristic to us.
I'll agree with entirely. That is a whole.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the point on development. That seems to be a huge common factor. Regular feedback, say, just letting people know. You mentioned about actually it's not really possible to give likes internally. We also use Microsoft Teams, which is very similar to Slack. So we try to celebrate success every Monday. We have a group call in Zoom in, and somebody has to share something that went well last week. And then they get a round of applause, or we give praise on that. And there's actually a like feature, which it's just a good way of kind of giving feedback quickly, which seems to be important. The culture of the business, think about this, the way senior management communicate to people. Are you approachable? Will people come to you? And in terms of something not to do, don't assume that they'll be motivated by money, because they really aren't, and you've got to go a lot deeper than that, really.
I totally agree with culture as a massive part. I think if you're really going to try and find the best and brightest of the recruits out there, and avoid any, let's say, time wasters maybe, then you've got to have a really deep understanding of what your practice stands for and what your key values are, because then that's where you can grow, and you tie in someone who works with those values, and then that's where you create company culture and you support one another. I think the other thing is to never take someone for granted. That doesn't mean that you praise them and give them likes all the time. As you're saying, we can't click the like button, but get them involved, get them sharing, give them responsibility, because actually that's what they're looking for, and nurture them. So we, as I was saying, we have a Facebook group. We try and have that personal element to learning. So, did you see this article? It's really interesting. What did everyone else think? Just having that conversation, that continual, nurturing their learning and development, and making sure they're constantly getting something out of their role, not from just their technical ability, but from their life in terms of their career.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the three of you very much indeed for all of your time today. I hope you got something from this that was useful. Millennials, I think that it's just the next generation coming through. They are different. Generation Z's going to be even more different. And the way that we think about it has to be conscious. But there's one thing that of which I'm absolutely certain, I can say this with a few years of experience, is watching the evolution of business in the way that we interact, watching the evolution that's taking place in accounting practices and in business general. It has never been faster than it is at this moment in time. And I think really the message to everybody is if you want to stay current, if you want to stay competitive, if you want to basically be able to hire the best, if you want to be able to go out and win new business, then you need to evolve and use these technologies and use, if you like, best practice and better communication in order to stay competitive in the world that we're living in. So thank you very much indeed for your time. We're out of time from the point of view of the formal presentation, but if you've got any questions, we'd be delighted to actually take them straight after this. Thank you very much indeed.